future generations will look back on us and go, why did you not stop this? Why couldn't you have done more? And I think that's very telling.
Will we shape the change of the ecosystem out there if we kill 3/4 of the species? And what's it going to be like for anthropologists 1,000 years from now, assuming we're still around?
It's very exciting to think what technology can do just in the next 10 years. I mean, you look at the techniques that people have been sampling data, for example, and there were very destructive techniques for taking out bits of bone from the skull and then analyzing them. But now we have these incredible machines, CT scans, synchrotrons, that can do it for us. That can beam particles through the actual specimen itself, and we can get a tomography, like a 3D model that's even better than anything we could have ever printed out with hands. So I think technology is an absolute win. I think it really just comes down to education.
If you were going to pack today to go park at an event that there would be families there, what would you pack?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, obviously fossils are the first answer for all of that. But what kind of fossils? For me, I'm a big advocate of whales. I love them. I think they're fantastic. They're the biggest animals that have ever lived in the history of the world. I think they're very, very exciting, and I think you can attest to that as well. But for me, there's one particular group of whales that I find more exciting than anything else, and they are on my shirt, right? You can see that. You can see Orcinus just there, the orca or the killer whale, blackfish. And they're kind of thought to be as a top predator today. They can take down a blue whale, and that's pretty incredible considering the immense size of an animal that weighs the same as 30 African elephants. They're absolutely gigantic. But 5 to 6 million years ago, there was another animal that pretty much occupied the same ecological niche of an orca. And there were whispers of it for the longest time, and people didn't really know what it was, and people knew that it was contemporaneous with the megalodon as well. And they were like, yeah, the megalodon, a big shark, 15 meters long, size of a modern humpback whale, 250 teeth, same size as your hand, really exciting animal, right? But then every now and again, somebody would find a little fragment of tooth suggesting that there was an even bigger, or maybe even a predator the same size as the megalodon.
No way!
In 2008, in the middle of a Peruvian desert of the Ica province, a paleontologist was walking and they found this huge skull eroding out of the dust-ridden surface. And when they had a closer inspection of it, they originally thought it was a baleen whale. What it turned out to be, though, was a type of sperm whale. They called it a killer sperm whale, and it's very different from the modern varieties because it has the modern sperm whale has these large pegs on the lower jaw. They're thought to be mainly Architeuthis, which is basically squid-eating kinds of whale. And they dive incredibly deep, but this kind of whale was very different because it had teeth in the upper jaws as well, and its teeth were immense. So that thick, that big, just one single tooth, 36.2 centimeters in length. It's the biggest functional tooth ever found in the animal kingdom. Its skull was 3 meters in length, the size of a small car. Its teeth were shaped like artillery shells. And they named it in 2010. They called it Leviathan melvillei, Herman Melville's great white whale, after Moby Dick. And so the tooth is very, very exciting because it represents an animal that is getting to the size of a megalodon. And so that's something I would put on the table, just there, because that's exciting. Other things I'd probably put on the table, because I've got them with me right now. We did a number of expeditions up until about mid-March of this year, but unfortunately the lab was closed, so a lot of the specimens had to come back to someone's house. They came back to me, of course. So I kind of set up an impromptu lab in doing so. This is the anterior end, right at the ends of the jaw of just a small baleen whale. So it was just lying there on the bottom of the seafloor. So that would probably be something that I also put there. Of course, big shark teeth are always really exciting. I used this one at the beginning just here to show you. You can see that there, but they get a lot bigger. They can get to about that size. So this one here comes from the ancestor of the great white shark, Carcharodon histalis. It's about 5 million years of age. All these fossils on the table are roughly about 5 million years of age. It's really exciting. And then I probably put some really obscure fossils in there as well, to try and get people to ask what they are. This was one that we found the other day. If I showed you this, what would you think it is?
Well, when you turned it made it start to look like it was a tibia of some kind of animal that was little.
It's a limb bone, you're right. So
a metatarsal?
No, this is a humerus from a penguin just here. So they're
That's
actually really, really rare finds because they're not often found, and the only living representative of the penguins that we have in Australia today are the little penguins, and that's it. Megalodon teeth, of course, would be other things that I'd probably put on the table because who doesn't love big shark teeth? They're just fabulous in every single sense of the word. Shark-bitten bone, you know, big ribs, big vertebrae, you know, the list can go on and on and on. I mean, for me, I think the reason why I love whales so much is because of just how bizarre they are today.
What do you mean?
So, like, you take a beaked whale, for example. They're the deepest diving mammal on the planet, and they hold their breath for almost 3 hours at a time. They can dive down to more than 2 kilometers below the surface of the water, and we know absolutely nothing about how these creatures work. They utilize a form of biological sonar in the depths, and that biological sonar enables them to see without actually having to use their eyes. They emit these high-pitched clicks that go out and they come back and they're received through the lower jaw and up through the back ends of the skull. And in doing so, they can perceive everything in their environment. And their skulls are incredibly bizarre. I mean, there was a new species that was described last year that's 6 meters in length that had evaded humans for this entire time. And it's amazing. We're only just starting to find out this information right now. And there's always that one fact that will get me about whales. And that single fact, and I was in about year 8, which would have been about 14 years old, and I was reading a book. And in the book, it talked about the evolutionary ancestry of the whale and where they came from. And when I looked at it, I couldn't quite believe my eyes, and I went up to my teacher and I said, did whales really come from land? Did they actually come from land? It makes a lot of sense. They're mammals, of course. They have hair, follicles on the ends of their nose. They suckle their young with milk. They're warm-blooded. And he said, yeah, they are. And they've even found their fossil ancestors as well. And the idea that Pakicetus would have ever been found in the fossil record, the walking whale from Indo-Pakistan with 4 legs, it looks more like a mix between a Labrador and an otter than it does a whale, and that it would ever be found is absolutely stupendous. And I still will never get over that.
So 8-year-old Bryce, this was one of his questions.
I'm Bryce. I'm almost 9. My birthday's on April 2nd. What was the first dinosaur on the planet?
Okay. What's the first whale ever? What he calls a dinosaur whale. So how do you answer that, land versus water? And how do you explain to an 8-year-old why that animal was formed and how you can tell?
Oh, it's a very good question, that one there. And I think it all comes back to knowing the data. And so when you look, and we'll just use this very quickly, when you look at this humerus, there are a number of characters, defined areas on the bone that you can attribute to being a penguin that you can't find anywhere else in any other group of animals at all. So the way in which the humerus itself is flattened, which forms the flipper itself, they're very robust, they're very dense as well. They have this condyle just here, and when you look at other modern penguin humeri, they look exactly the same as the one that you can find there as well. There's very little difference throughout evolutionary time with this one specific bone. And in terms of answering the very first dinosaur whale one there, it actually, you can bring the answer all the way back to the time of the dinosaurs. And I think it's also very, very important to do that. When that meteorite collided with Earth, it didn't just kill off the dinosaurs, it killed off the flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, but it also killed off the marine reptiles as well, like your mosasaurs. And so they basically held on to the same kind of niche, the same area that whales occupy today. And so when that meteorite traveled and smashed into Earth, it wiped out pretty much anything that weighed more than 25 kilos in weight. It took the Earth a very long time to recover, and it's in estimates of about 10 million years. So Pakicetus is the very first one, and what we find is that this animal is trying to basically take the void of some of the marine reptiles that would have tried to have gone in first. Now, it wouldn't have thought about doing it. The main reason any animal does what it does is because of food. It's because it's hungry, and it would have realized that there was a glut of food, possibly just as simple as sardines or larger fish, that were swimming around in the Eocene ocean some 50 million years ago. And as any opportunistic mammal, you would be silly to avoid that food source. And so what it did is it decided to go diving. It decided to go swimming and trying to catch those whales. And over many sequential generations, time and time again, it was able to adapt to its marine lifestyle that little bit better by having webbed toes. And then when you space it out to millions and millions of years, you start to see that the long tail at the back of its body starts to become a fluke, like a modern whale today. You start to see the nostrils migrating from the tip of its nose to the middle of its head to form a blowhole, because it's that much easier to breathe when you come up to the surface of the water rather than having to go like that and then go back under as well. So the very first dinosaur whale was AskAScientist from Pakistan itself, and it was a very exciting whale when it came into the literature.